Good morning. Welcome to today's Spotlight webinar on the Maryland Statewide Transit Plan. This webinar is made possible by the Maryland Department of Transportation's Commuter Choice Maryland program. My name is Gladys Hurwitz. I am the Multimodal Transportation Specialist at the Maryland Department of Transportation and moderator for this session. This session is being recorded. Here are some quick webinar FAQs to keep in mind. Make sure that you chose either the computer or phone for your audio preference. Use the question window to ask us questions. We also have time dedicated for question and answers after the presentation. And the recording of the session will be available along with slide decks at our website, commuterchoicemaryland.com, post-session. Throughout the session, we will be utilizing Poll Everywhere to get your feedback. Please either join by web at pollev.com and enter MDOT 253 or by text by texting MDOT 253 to 22333. Then you'll be able to text in your responses. I'll give you guys a second or two just to get that together, so then you have that ready. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with Commuter Choice Maryland, it is a transportation demand management program of the Maryland Department of Transportation that promotes alternatives to driving alone. As you can see in our list of alternative options, this can include anything from public transportation, biking, ride sharing, transit, walking, and teleworking. All of these options are important because they help Maryland reduce congestion, conserve energy, protect the environment, and improve the quality of life of all Marylanders. Commuter Choice Maryland has been around for over a decade and underwent a program update in 2018. During these past 2 years, we have refined the program focus, offerings, outreach, and continue to build partnerships. Commuter Choice Maryland also provides resources for commuters to help them determine the best commute option that suits their needs. Our website serves as a centralized resource for commuters who may need information on transportation options, along with other valuable resources such as how to connect with Maryland Rideshare TDM rep, information on guaranteed ride home, and how to find the best commute that works for you. Employer program services include information on how to get a commuter benefits program started or how to expand an existing commuter program. Marketing materials are available for download to help your employees with commute options. We also provide technical assistance to participating employers who need help with commuter benefits, such as the Maryland Commuter Tax Credit and Transportation Fringe Benefits. We worked with the University of Maryland Transit Institute to develop a commuter calculator that can help commuters who may be driving into work by themselves every day and are open to considering a new commute with benefit estimates for choosing an alternative commute. By inputting information such as your start and end locations, preferred departure times, number of days you commute, and vehicle info, the calculator will help determine how much you can save on gas, vehicle maintenance costs, parking cost savings, and environmental benefits for various commute options. Business toolkits have also been developed to help businesses and organizations in Maryland who are thinking about starting up a telework program, van pool, or commuter benefits program. Maryland businesses and organizations have shared that many of them were interested in offering commuter benefits such as telework, but didn't know where to start. So we developed this resource tool that includes information on benefits of telework, what to include in a telework policy, sample telework agreement, technology considerations, and other resources. We continue to look for more businesses and organizations to highlight for best transportation practices in our newsletters and websites. Past businesses that we have highlighted include the University of Maryland, Yakabad, Live Casino and Hotel, SMECO, IOPA, and Morgan State University. If you would like to be highlighted or would like to make a recommendation, please contact us. By the way, we encourage all transportation success stories from organizations and businesses from all sizes. We also offer webinars on a regular quarterly basis. Many of our webinars have touched on various transportation topics such as commuter benefits, business tax credits, and reflections of remote work during COVID-19 lessons learned from Maryland businesses to provide support and inspiration during the pandemic. All of our past webinars are available on our website for viewing. Also, be sure to sign up for our upcoming Spotlight webinar, where we will have the Greater Washington Partnership share what they learned from the Capital COVID-19 Return to Work Survey that was administered to businesses and organizations throughout the region, and learn about available tools and resources that they recently developed to help your business and organization with their return back to work to the workplace. Registration is now open on our website. So let's take a quick poll to get a sense of how familiar you are with the Maryland Statewide Transit Plan. So go ahead and go to pollev.com and enter in MDOT 253 or text MDOT 253 to 22333 and register your answer. Are you very familiar with the Maryland Statewide Transit Plan? Somewhat familiar? Or maybe you're not familiar at all and you're just really excited to learn more about that plan. So it looks like a couple of you have registered your answers. It looks like right now the majority of folks are very familiar with the statewide transit plan. And about a quarter are somewhat familiar and not familiar. And oh, looks like the number went up a little bit. I'll give you folks like another second or so to register your answer. And I'm gonna go ahead and lock in this poll. So it looks like it's pretty split right now. 36% are very familiar and also not familiar, but excited to learn more. With the rest of the folks on the call who were able to register the answer are somewhat familiar. So hopefully with our next slides where we introduce our speakers, our guest speakers, you'll be able to learn more. So today we have our guest speakers, Jade Clayton, Senior Planner, Project Manager, and Jamie McKay, Transportation Planner from the Office of Planning and Programming at MDOT MTA, who will be sharing information regarding the Maryland Transit Plan. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today.
Thank you for the introduction, Gladys.
You're welcome.
Hi, and thank you to everyone. We're really excited to tell you more about the development of the statewide transit plan. We're actually going to go off video after saying quick hellos, so that the emphasis is really on the information in the slides today. All right, here we go, Jamie.
I'm ready.
All right, next slide. So a quick overview of what we're going to talk about with you all today. And we really want this to be conversational, so please make use of the chat and also of the polls that Gladys has put in for us today. And we really want to get feedback from everyone as we're developing the plan. So we'll talk about the purpose of it, schedule, where we are right now, context about why we're doing the plan, what we've heard so far, because we've been doing outreach since about, I'd say, summer, fall of last year. Continue to have conversation throughout this presentation, and then give you some ways to provide input in the future after this webinar. And then we'll just open it up to any last questions and comments, including answering some of the questions we received at registration. All right, so the overall purpose of this plan is to create a 50-year vision for transit in Maryland. So 50 years is a long time. We're going to talk about that. But we want this to be very much centered on the desired experience and outcomes of riders, including those who maybe don't ride transit today but would like to, if it met their needs or served their area in the future. We also want to stitch together local and regional plans to coordinate transit across the state. So, if you're familiar with MDOT MTA as your transit provider, there are also over 20 transit providers serving other parts of the state. And oftentimes services don't quite connect, or they kind of end at the borders of each county. So we're looking at what plans are already there to better, integrate and connect and expand service, as well as seeing what's missing. And then at the end of this plan, will really lead into an action plan. So we don't want this to just sit on the shelf, but really lead to strategies that we can start implementing right away and lead into the goals and the vision that we want for the next 50 years. And so again, this will be both a community-driven and a data-driven plan. So a lot of data and analysis, but also a lot of just talking to people and knowing what their experience is now and what they want it to be in the future. So this timeline here, we did research and listen. There was a public survey out last year in September and October. We have been continuing to do briefings and meetings like this, and we'll continue to do that through the development of the plan, while we're also doing research internally with our team. And then in the summer of 2021, we'll have a draft plan, and that'll be open for a public comment period. And with those that we have emails from today and who we've talked to through these briefings, we'll be sure to send out an email blast and notify people when that draft is up for comment. And then we're looking to finalize that in the fall. And then we move into implementation, as mentioned, and implementation of individual strategies will continue to involve the public to get input on more, refined actions that we take. Okay, so as we mentioned, 50 years is a long time. We like to provide this slide just to show perspective of how much can change in 50 years. So now, a little more than 50 years ago, MTA took over the Baltimore Transit Company for the first time. You see Amtrak establishing passenger rail in the 70s as well. DC Metro was starting to expand more into Maryland and has continued to. And then we see the Purple Line, a project that many may be familiar with on this call, expanding more rail in the DC region. We see a lot of local operators in Maryland popping up over the years. MTA taking over paratransit almost 50 years ago and continuing to provide that service, as well as local operators providing paratransit and demand response service in their areas, adding light rail in the 90s. And yeah, so you can just see how much can change in 50 years to think about how much could possibly change in another 50 years. And then on the next slide, we, just for more perspective about what impacts that change, is developed land in Maryland. So you can see about 50 years ago, those red areas are really the significantly developed areas of Maryland versus 2010. So a little more than 10 years ago now, that spread of development throughout the state. And has transit been able to keep up with that spread, and will it be able to in the next 50 years? Next slide. So as we mentioned, we've been having a lot of these meetings for the past few months, as well as doing surveys. We've been talking to local operators and providers, local planning staff about what they're seeing on the ground. We hear a lot about wanting more connections between rural and urban areas, just generally wanting more comfortable, safe, and efficient transfers between services, in addition to just on the individual services themselves, being more reliable and frequent, more hours of service. So, in some areas they may be peak only. People would really like more midday service, more weekend service, to make transit more of an option, not just to get to work, but really to live and do other things as well. Having transit supportive land use and development. So we saw that last slide of how things have spread, and as we continue to grow, how can we complement land use and transit more? More sidewalks, that seems like an obvious one, but more sidewalks so you can actually get to transit, get to things, and not just rely on a car or even a bus. More things within a walking and biking distance, and then getting to transit to get longer distances. Funding transit both to maintain and expand service to meet the needs of everyone. Low and no emission vehicle technology to reduce our environmental impacts. We got questions about that quite a bit in the registration. And just overall improving awareness of what's available. So it's not just, that we're putting the service out there, that people know what it is and how to use it. So next slide. So that was sort of statewide themes. This certainly doesn't cover everything, but a few regional themes from the 5 sort of regions that we designate in the area, and this aligns with how it's done in the Maryland Transportation Plan. In the Baltimore area, just more rail and intercity service, more east to west crossing services as well. Just general ability to live car-free. In the DC metro, more interstate connectivity, getting more into Virginia, Maryland, and then more intercity weekend service as well. For Southern Maryland, more connections into DC, but also beyond DC into Virginia and Maryland. Access to military installations and colleges, including community colleges. For Eastern, more transit service overall, particularly serving aging populations. We're hearing a lot about aging adults in coastal regions and needing to have service, particularly flexible and demand response service that can meet their needs. And then on the Western, I said Western Shore, and Western Maryland, out-of-state job connections would be helpful into West Virginia, into Pennsylvania, and also deeper into Maryland, and just generally connecting other regions into Western Maryland as a destination. So next, we have another poll for you all about what would you add? And knowing that the Commuter Choice Maryland audience is employers, rideshare coordinators, what are you hearing from your customers or your employees if they are riding transit or wanting to ride transit? So I see convenience, definitely. Later hours, definitely something we've heard about in a few different regions, including getting to shift jobs. Yes, absolutely. Expanding weekend hours. Looking for aging needs in Carroll County. This could be about accessing medical services, outside of peak hours, consistency for sure. Connections between counties, so maybe just physically, but yeah, integration too. Maybe in how you pay, how you get schedules, make transfers. Industrial parks for sure. Also another area where, span of service is important. Safer access, yes. Seeing a lot of third shift needs, kind of combining those. You have people who are traveling to work at 11 p.m., safe access, lighting, and the service, all important. More commute options in rural areas, definitely. Better bus stops, more reliable and punctual. All good goals to have. I think if this is starting to slow down, Gladys, let me know if you want to move on. East to west, oh, sure.
Okay, yeah, I'm gonna lock the survey so we can move on to the next slide for the sake of time. That's okay.
Awesome. Yeah, really appreciate seeing some comments from Garrett County in Western Maryland and an Eastern Shore. Okay, so getting into the public survey responses that we received. This was open in September and October, as we mentioned. Certainly didn't get as many responses as we hoped, so we kind of see this more as like taking a temperature and indicating who we need to talk to now in these briefings. Not particularly representative of Maryland or transit riders, but got a good idea of what people are thinking, and again, what kind of questions and people we should follow up on. So on to the next slide. So the survey did ask people if they use transit, and this was based on pre-COVID, of course. If you're riding transit sometimes or often, or if even pre-COVID you were not using transit, and why. So we have a lot of people saying that they use transit because it's a less stressful way to travel, saving money, better utilizing time, doing some of that multitasking on the train on the way to work, or simply because they do not own or have access to a car, among other reasons. And then for those who don't use transit, saying it doesn't go where they need it to go, takes too long or isn't frequent enough compared to driving, isn't flexible enough, for those imperfect days, and generally feeling safer and in control if you're, driving yourself to and from where you need to go. So next slide. And then we asked more transit riders about what part of their trip works well. So this is kind of listed in order of, first you find information to plan your trip and how well is that working right now. So you can kind of see an almost 50-50 split of people saying that's easy to do versus not. Understanding and purchasing fares working pretty well in terms of just understanding how to do it and how much it costs. Finding and getting to and from transit stations a little less great. And then waiting at transit stops or stations, even less so. And I think that can have a lot to do with the frequency and how long you're waiting and how comfortable that wait is. Those gray dashed lines are also indicating responses by riders who identified as having a disability. And so, if, for their experience is that, more or less the same. And we can see that there is a bit of a difference across these different parts of the trip. And then, of course, riding and getting on the vehicle probably seems like the part that's working best for people, but really it's just getting to the vehicle and getting on. That's the challenge. Transferring between different routes seems to be the thing that's working least across the board, which is something that we're hearing a lot in your comments about integration and just better connection of scheduling. And then just interaction with staff, also an area for improvement, but really that, transferring between services and better connections and integration is the big thing. All right, so next slide. And then we just asked more generally, because this plan will include, visions and goals, statements and strategies, what's really most important to people over the next 50 years or even in the next, 5 and 25 years. What really bubbled up to the top across the state was more equitable mobility. And then second, more regional connections, which we've really, repeated a lot in this already, is just getting across those county boundaries. People's lives aren't really confined just within the county they live in, getting longer trips, and then providing more local connections as well. So tying in those local plans to a wider state vision for transit. Again, supporting the ability to live car-free, contributing to reduced environmental impacts, safer, more comfortable, and also adopting technology in a way that doesn't, widen barriers or gaps, but instead, improves overall customer experience. And we are also surprised to see, and are repeating this more, that transit can really be more than commuting. I know this audience is thinking about how people are getting to work, but a lot of people put long distance modes of travel as their top priority, and then also being able to use transit for recreational and social activities on top of getting to work. And you can see other things like getting to medical appointments, running errands, food access, and getting to education opportunities up there as well. I think at this point, I am handing it off to Jamie.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to go over briefly our vision and goals. So navigating to my notes. So throughout this outreach effort, we've been reaching folks who use transit and those who don't, folks who work in the transportation sector, employers and employees, and really a wide variety of people for whom transportation is a focus. Through that effort, we've been able to develop this vision and these goals. And I encourage you to take a moment and review these, and certainly provide any feedback that you have on either in the chat. I know that this is a short conversation this afternoon, but this is also available on our Statewide Transit Plan project website. So if you find yourself reflecting after the meeting has concluded, we appreciate any feedback that you have, and our contact information and this material is available online. So go ahead to the next slide for me. So thank you again for your input so far. Let's quickly review what the map of fixed route transit looks like statewide. And I know we heard some feedback in an earlier poll response about Western Maryland and the Eastern Shore specifically. I'll call out that this map doesn't show details on demand response services, but that these do exist statewide. Go ahead to the next slide. So our transit-oriented populations focus on where people are using transit today, and it helps us better inform our modeling and our strategies as we develop this plan over the next 50 years. Next slide. So along with stakeholders, including our locally operated transit systems and county staff from across Maryland, we've reviewed plans to ensure we're capturing details on existing plans and efforts. And we're focusing on places like priority funding areas, activity centers, and existing frequent transit. As has been mentioned a few times during our discussion today, riders are the heart of this effort, and we're working to elevate the perspective of folks using transit for a variety of needs and wants. Let's go ahead to the next slide. So, because of your unique perspectives on how transit impacts users, we'd love to hear more about what we can include. You know, better serving Marylanders across the state is a critical focus for us, but there's a special effort to ensure that people facing additional challenges or barriers to transit have their interests represented. Certainly now more than ever, as a result of the COVID pandemic, it's important for us to make sure our essential workers can access transit and continue to keep Maryland moving. So, what types of feedback do you have? And I believe we have a poll. So tell us a little bit about what you would prioritize in this plan. What areas of your region need more transit, whether it's frequency, coverage, or span, so overnight and weekend? What types of improved infrastructure or new infrastructure would best support transit in your areas? Things perhaps like dedicated lanes, transfer hubs, improved pedestrian infrastructure or connections that make using transit safer. What types of policy or technology updates or upgrades should be leveraged? So in your area, would things like real-time information, fare enhancements, or coordinated service between systems help? And finally, when we think about transit over the next 50 years, what overall outcomes should transit look to achieve? So I've given you a lot of prompts, and I see some responses rolling in, including downtown Columbia to DC. Great. So that's an identified gap where we could provide more transit. Better transfers between providers and transit availability beyond on-demand services. Certainly looking into things like electric vehicles and low emission vehicles or zero emission vehicles as we move throughout the next 50 years. I am appreciative of the inclusion of greater proportion of funding for transit. Certainly, the pandemic has highlighted an issue with funding for transit across the state and the need to make sure transit is accessible and affordable. So I see better connectivity and suburb to suburb transit. These are very valuable things to have. And I understand that we are on a bit of a time crunch. So if you think of things as we move forward, again, we encourage you to reach out. And I'll share with you in just a moment how to do so. So time for any last responses? And if not, we'll lock this in and we'll move to the next slide. So we are currently here and we're doing the second round of outreach where we share survey responses and how we intend to use them. And we continue to conduct virtual presentations to small groups, keeping this an open dialogue between folks throughout Maryland and the project team. You'll see in the spring, we'll have our third round of outreach where we'll publish our draft plan and we'll open it back for public comment. So certainly stay tuned for more information on that. Go ahead to the next slide. So as we wrap up, we want to invite you to stay involved and stay updated with what's happening with our statewide transit plan. You can visit our project webpage, which is listed here, mta.maryland, spelled out, .gov/statewide-plan. You can view our schedule of activities. You can see a survey response summary, which also provides some takeaways, a little bit more in depth than what we've been able to share during this presentation. You can read some frequently asked questions and learn how to reach the project team. And you can also note where the draft plan will be published and provide public comment when it is released. Finally, if you have questions, you'd like to provide feedback, or you'd like to request a briefing, you can reach out to our project team using this information. So we've shared a lot with you today, and we are wrapping up. So if you do have any questions, we'd invite you to go ahead and type your questions into the question window. And as we close, I'd like to share the opportunity to continue to engage with MDOT MTA on a number of ongoing projects and encourage you to reach out and stay involved. Certainly, our projects are enhanced by this type of vigorous public involvement, and it allows us to better serve our communities across Maryland. So thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see some questions roll in.
Great, thanks for that, Jamie and Jade. So it looks like we did receive a couple of questions early on. So let's just keep the discussion going, if that's okay with you, ladies. So let's see, for our first question, would you be able to expand on environmental impacts to air, soil, and water? More specifically, which method of transportation is the Maryland State Transit Plan? Which parts of it would be environmentally friendly? If you'd be able to expand a little bit more on that topic.
Sure. So something that we're already looking into, but we definitely want to grow into the future, is more about vehicle technology that reduces our emissions and our impact on the environment. And I think we will talk about that more in the plan. I know that I'd say there's a particular mode, but whether it's bus or rail, just looking at how technology innovations can better avoid or at least mitigate environmental impacts. Do you want to add anything to that, Jamie?
I think you've covered it nicely.
Great. So there was another question regarding high-speed buses. Is that in the horizon at all?
So the statewide plan will look into, both just basic geographic, is there transit here or not, but also if there's transit, is it at the service level that's needed for this area? And so that may start to get into, presumably, I think things like BRT as a solution, or more express service, just to get a little bit further, a little faster, as well as using treatments like dedicated bus lanes, other complete streets, or curb management policies to move things along.
Okay, great. We had another question asking how the statewide transportation plan will be implemented for the Eastern Shore and Western Maryland for impact on economic development.
I think that's a similar answer. Maybe Jamie wants to tackle this, but just kind of looking at where transit does not exist, or where it could be added or have more service, and trying to match that up with what destinations are, currently underserved or unserved that we know are, have a high attractiveness for transit service.
I'd add that it's also important for us to build off what we've heard from folks living and working in those areas. And certainly they request connections to jobs and opportunities, but also mobility between regions. And these types of efforts you'll see reflected in our goals and in some of the strategies we're beginning to develop to solve some of these issues.
So that, I think that pretty much touches on this next question. which asks if you can provide any insight regarding any plans to close the commuter rail gap between Perryville and Newark or Wilmington, Delaware.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect example of a particular service or project that we would want to see in this plan. Since it's 50-year, we can be pretty visionary, and we have ongoing planning efforts and have been looking into that and speaking with our counterparts up north about it.
Okay, great. So another person asks, as transportation continues to be a challenge for older adults and people with disabilities, what goals in this plan, I know you're in the process of refining and developing them still, but what do you envision or see the goals will be to address that group?
So for people with disabilities, I think an example would be just something that people want now, and that we mentioned a little earlier about more sidewalks, but that those sidewalks are also accessible so that just getting to the service in the first place isn't such a challenge. And for older adults, I think providing more flexible options that meet their needs for things like medical appointments, particularly in those rural areas that we mentioned. But the more, we hear specific examples about experiences and have these conversations, we can refine the strategies that end up in the plan this summer.
Okay, great. So we did receive some questions about commuter options from one Maryland county to another. I'll start off by sharing, please connect with your Maryland rideshare or TDM rep in your county. These representatives are equipped to help you figure out the right commute option to get to work or travel from county to county. If there are any businesses or organizations on this call, also feel free to reach out to these representatives because they can assist you with free technical support to help you figure out the best commute option for your employees, including helping you to administer a commuter input survey and develop a customized transportation plan for your organization and business. All of these services are free to you. I repeat, all of these services are free, believe it or not. So to get connected, visit our website, commuterchoicemaryland.com. Jamie, Jade, would you like to add anything else about that?
I just want to, again, thank everyone for their participation and continue to encourage folks to reach out to us as they reflect on the presentation today or as they go throughout their existing work life. How are ways that the statewide transit plan can better serve you, your employees, and your community? Keep us informed, and thank you.
Awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and just take one last question. So we received a question about commuter benefits that help businesses stay competitive and any additional details about commuter benefit options available. So businesses and organizations in Maryland have shared that they offer commuter benefits such as transportation fringe benefits, where up to $170 can be taken out of an employee's paycheck as pre-tax deduction for transit, van pools, or parking, or the Maryland commuter tax credit, where Maryland employers can claim a tax credit of 50% of eligible costs are providing commuter benefits such as transit, van pools, cash in lieu of parking, and company paid guaranteed ride home. This was really a great way for them to stay competitive. Those that offered those benefits saw an increase in employee retention and positive impacts to their business's bottom line. So I think this is all the time that we have for today. I thank our guests, Jamie and Jade, for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and everybody who was able to join us on this call today. Registration is now open on our website for our next session on February 10th, where we will hear from guest speakers from the Greater Washington Partnership. As always, we are ready to assist you with your commuter needs. Our office remains virtually open during this pandemic, so feel free to reach out to us or give us a call or shoot us a voicemail or email with any questions or assistance. And lastly, follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn, and we'll be sure to follow back. Thank you and stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.